Matt Seibert. He is the Director of Agent Development for LIFE180. And we are continuing with our series, trying to do weekly series on just life insurance agent training. Just to kind of give a little quick background, Matt and I met. Matt was somebody who had been representing Index Universal Life and selling clients Index Universal Life for about a decade. He found my content and I think kind of had this like, oh crap moment. And was just like, well, there's no way Chris can be right. And then he dove a little deeper and was like, oh crap, there may be a chance Chris is right. And then called me up, and he just so happens to live about a half hour away from me. And so we met in person, had a really, really good conversation. It's blossomed into a great partnership. And so it's, I mean, is there anything else you want to add to that? Like, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward, man. It's been quite a journey for sure. I thought I was going one direction, and then I met some random guy on YouTube saying he was like the only one saying this stuff. And I said, this can't be true. And I met you and I'm like, crap, this is
dang it.
Now I'm in the whole completely different direction. I'm thankful
there
for
we
it.
go. That's awesome.
Thankful.
Well, so I thought, we were talking about what we're going to do for today's training. And it's funny because we're like, hey, let's role play a little bit and let's talk about Index Universal Life and come at it through the angle of all of the IUL defensive people. I don't know how else to phrase that. Like the people that believe in IUL and have all these arguments for why IUL is actually a good product and is a good solution for people. And let's go through all of their rebuttals that they utilize. And we're probably not going to cover all of them, right. But let's role play to the best of our ability. And like have this conversation, because I think in this rebuttal, we're going to have the opportunity to train people. People are going to have the opportunity to kind of see what's what as far as like how the product works. And I really want to, can you see the chats like in the side when you're looking in the feed here? You can see the chat. So if anybody has any comments or questions or, about any of this stuff, feel free to chime in. Because maybe as we are role playing and more, topics come up, you'll be able to, chime in and go deeper on the question or whatever it is. The goal is to be as wide open as possible on this video. I've got my board behind me. We've got a couple predefined kind of like questions or statements, comments, defense points that IUL agents typically use. That we're going to start with. And then ultimately we can go as deep as possible. I already asked Matt if he's got a hard stop, because this is one of those topics that could go a while because it'll, so dig in, get ready. This is going to be fun. If you're watching the replay, put it on 2X and get through this. You're going to want to stick around. This is going to be awesome. So anyway, all right. So let's do this, Matt. A lot of times, I'm dealing with people. You're talking to a lot of the agents that are calling up to join us, and people that are selling, representing IUL right now. And you actually just had a conversation with somebody the other day who is selling it, and then kind of had this awakening moment, and then they had to like let their family know and whatever that, oh my gosh, like this isn't what I thought it was. So walk through that and let's like start from that as a point, and then we'll talk about the specific products and ask questions about, the holes in IUL and like we'll go from there.
Yeah, man. I think, I'm talking to a lot of agents that are coming over and they're seeing what we're doing. They're liking it. They're coming to work with us. And a lot of them are coming from like, WFG, PHP, PFA. Yeah. They're coming from companies where their, bread and butter is like IULs.
Yeah.
And the conversations are very similar. They say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing. And I came across Chris's video and I need to figure out if there's something that I'm missing. And I just see a common pattern. I think what happens is a lot of these companies, they go in, they don't ask any questions because they're kind of green to the industry. And, they have some sort of relationship, because most of the time when you go into these companies, it's through a relationship. They do that on purpose to create trust. And
Yep.
so you're going to all these training, everything sounds great because you're selling concept, you're selling, illustrations, and you don't really question it. And you get sold on this idea. I'm going to go out, help people financially. Everything's great. And then you go on YouTube and then you come across your video. You're like, who is this guy?
Who is this clown?
Opposite
He
of
can't be right. He's the only one talking like this.
And I usually, I have those conversations and they're like, yeah, I came across Chris's video and I just don't understand what's going on. And what I love about it is I actually lived it. Like I've sold IULs for close to a decade. And I've been in that situation where I totally believed in it. I thought they were like the perfect vehicle. I was anti-market, anti-401k because the IUL replaces it all. And, then I came across your video. And I think what separates, me from a lot of other people, like I genuinely wanted to know, because if there's something wrong with what I'm doing, I need to know now. Whereas some people, they don't want to ask questions because they don't want to know, you know what I mean? They just want to continue their path. And, when you and I met, it was just like, holy crap. Like I need to rethink my whole entire strategy and what I believed in. But I've noticed there's a lot of agents out there that are selling IULs. They don't actually know what they're selling. They don't even know how it works. And the way I know is everybody I ask them certain questions and they can't even answer it. And they come up with their own conclusion like, crap, I don't even have to tell them you don't know anything. I just ask them certain questions and they don't know. And I said, you should know the answer to these questions. And they realize, when they go to their upline, they go to their company, start asking questions, it's like frowned upon. Either they don't want to answer it or, they don't know themselves. And I think they realize like there's a problem here. And I think
here's the deal.
Yeah.
If you're watching this video right now and you stay tuned and you take all the stuff we're talking about and take notes, and then you go to your upline at World Financial Group or PHP or PFA or any of these places and you share with them all the things that you learned, you are going to ruin your relationship with them, because that means you are a critical thinker and they don't want you to think critically. They want you to follow their process and they want you to just blindly follow their sales presentation because they've got it figured out. And if you want to make money, like here's my biggest problem, then we'll get into the product. When you go to those companies, and their model and their messaging and like what they talk about is, we have this sales presentation dialed in. Your job is to sell off this script and this presentation. And so don't reinvent the wheel. Do what we tell you to do, because if you want to make money, this is how you do it. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're doing this just to make money and not serve people, well, then you're doing this for the wrong reason. You're going to hurt relationships that you have, because chances are you're going to start with your friends and family if you work with these companies, right? And so you're going to ruin and damage relationships from a long-term perspective, which this is one of the reasons I do what I do, is I try to save people from falling into that trap and ruining relationships. And so I would say really, really strap in, take notes, and go to the person who is your upline mentor and try to show them, try to teach them what's going on. Share this video after the fact, with them and see what's up, see how they respond. Because I think we have a responsibility to really understand what we're doing before recruiting anybody into the business, before selling this to anybody, whether it's whole life or IUL. I mean, nobody should ever put their money into something that they don't understand. So if you don't fully understand it and you're the one selling it, what the heck are you doing? You know what I mean? It's just, there's a massive discorrelation in values from that perspective, in my opinion. And, that's why, our focus at LIFE180 is to, train and create the best agents in the world focused on education. And, to my own detriment, a lot of times, I want to focus on going slow. And I use this in my videos all the time, be willing to go slow to go fast. I'd rather you come on board and take 3-4 months to learn it better. Everybody kind of has their own way and their own level of comfort, but I'd rather you not sell anything and learn it and be a more effective person that's actually adding value to the world than going out and ruining the industry, selling something you don't understand. The ripple effect of the negative side of that is huge. And so I just feel like we have a responsibility in that. And that's kind of what LIFE180 is kind of, taking the torch and leading from the front on in that respect. And obviously, we're fighting fighting a lot of fights along the way with all the people that disagree with us. So let's get into how people disagree with us. It'll be fun. So what do you say? What do you think? All right, like be an IUL agent with me right now. That okay. You just watch one of my videos and you're like, Chris, like, no, you're wrong.
All right, Chris. Hey, Chris. Look, I've been selling IULs forever.
Yep.
And I don't agree with anything you're saying. Now, because when I look at the illustrations, Chris, I mean, I sell IULs from multiple different companies. And if you look at the illustration, they actually show historicals of the rate of return, like what they credited in these IUL policies.
Yeah, that's great. This is going to be fun. I love this topic. This is one of my favorite topics, actually. So Matt, and by the way, everybody, Matt's not really feeling this way. We're role playing right now. Just everybody's. I could picture somebody taking these and making clips of it of like Matt with me. You know what I mean? Like it'd be funny. So I've got an illustration here, Matt, and I'm going to show you this. I don't want it to be my opinion versus anybody else's. I want to use a specific example, and I want to look at historical norms, and I want to just make sure that you and I are talking the same language, right? And we're on the same page. Okay. So what I want to make sure is this what you're talking about? Like when you look at the return, this is an illustration. Let me get there. This is an illustration. This is an Allianz Premier Pro Plus illustration. And so what they did is they say, all right, let's look at the historical index performance right here. And this is showing the S&P 500, or this is the Bloomberg Dynamic Index, but like it doesn't matter what company we're dealing with, they'd have whatever index, but it's showing, all right, the actual performance in 2005 was negative 0.836, 2.86, 37, like, and this just goes to show here, and then it shows what the hypothetical return is in the index. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So I get this question a lot, or I get this statement a lot. Like that is the area that, that people kind of see. And I'm going to expand my screen here so people can see it properly. But this is the area that I get a lot of pushback for. So here's what's really important to understand as we go into this is that when you have to understand the flow of money in an IUL. So when you look at the flow of money, you have a premium payment. That money goes into the general fund of the life insurance company. It kicks out a rate of return. And then it goes into, and I'm just going to go around the corner here. That rate of return kicks out, an options budget. Then you have to go buy options based on the cost. And then that, the options budget and the options cost dictate the index performance. So this is complicated stuff, right? So this is how they set cap rates, spread charges, par rates, and now and then you have to, well, we'll get into it all. So here's the deal. The index really has, whoa, what just happened here? I got to undo that. Something just happened. Bang. So what happened here is like people look at these numbers. They look at these indexes and they go, oh, well, this is conservative. Like because actual performance, actual historic performance, this is the historical performance of the index itself. And then it says actual. No, this is, you notice, well, let's get into the wordplay here, okay? Because I think this is really important, okay? There's actual performance and then hypothetical historical returns. You notice this?
Yeah.
Okay. So why do they do this? Actual performance is to be like, you see, like, this is what the market actually did. Not super sexy, not like whatever. But then they go hypothetical look backs. Well, the hypothetical historical return here is based on what we're talking about right here. During that whole time, they had options budgets and they had options costs, which led to all the variables that go into it. So the thing is here is that a lot of people go, oh, well, the only variable is this, what the market does. No, the variable isn't the index. The variable is what's the options budget, and that's dictated by the general fund and the rate of return the general fund kicks out. And then what is the cost of the options? These two things, 1 and 2 here, are what dictate the cap rate, the spread charges, the par rates. And if you're in an uncapped rate, there's also one other variable that comes into play. That variable is the risk-free rate, which is typically the risk-free rate is typically like a 10-year treasury. Right now it's like 5%, right? The risk-free rate functions like a spread charge. And the spread charge is basically saying, if it's a 7% spread charge or a 5% spread charge, it's saying the first 5% that the index does every year, you don't get to keep. Like that's the cost of being in the no cap index. Like that's going to come off the top. And so at the end of the day, these numbers, these hypothetical historical returns are based on the fact that we have, an options budget that's assumed, an options cost that's assumed. And at the end of the day, those are variables that constantly get changed, that the insurance company can and will change at any point in time. And, that's really what it comes down to. And so no matter what, I would argue that the index, these quote unquote conservative assumptions, when we're looking at this, it's not a matter like a lot of times. And this is the other thing. A lot of people will look at this and say, well, the S&P, and that's not for this one, but a lot of people will say like the S&P 500 averaged, 8.6% or whatever it is over a 20-year period. And so the fact that we're running this at 6.1%, this is conservative. Well, it's because the 6.1% here has nothing to do with this 8.6%. What has to do with this 6.1%, as far as what the policy will actually do, is based on the options budget, the options cost, what are the cap rates, the par rates and spread charges and all these things that are going to come into play, because that's going to dictate how the market performs. What the index does is actually one of the least impactful elements of the policy. That's just a measuring metric at the end of the day. You have to realize the cap rates and the par rates are going to be what have the biggest impact on what the actual performance is of said index. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Well, it does for me. And I think a lot of agents, they're probably sitting down and trying to digest that. But I think correct me if I'm wrong, if you look at historical, really the big question is, that's a percentage of what number? Like, how do they come up with that number?
Well, the historical is a percentage that the historical performance is, I mean, in this one, this is this is an index. If let's say it was the S&P 500, just keep it simple, right? They would look at the actual performance of the S&P 500, right? But and that's the thing, they look at that and they'd say, all right, this was the performance of S&P 500 this year, and it's averaged that, and it is what it is. But the bottom line is, like, a lot of these companies are creating these engineered indexes, like the Bloomberg US Dynamic Balance 2 Index. Yeah. Like, do you know what that is? Like, that is an engineered index designed by these companies to get around buying the S&P 500. Why? Because of the fact that we have a supply and demand issue. Okay, check this out. We have a supply and demand issue. If you don't understand options, you should never get involved in Index Universal Life, because the bottom line is we have options equals supply, demand. How's that showing up here? I want to make sure I got this here. Okay. All right. Now I know where I'm writing. So we got this. Options are a supply and demand product. So here's the thing. In 2011, there were 14 IUL companies with millions of dollars in options. In 2023, there are 70 plus companies.
Wow.
With billions.
Wow.
Okay. So when we look at this and when we take that into consideration and we say this and we understand that options are supply demand, what happened is because of the growth of the companies and because of the growth of volume of dollars chasing the options, what happens? There's less demand because options are a limited product, right? And yes, somebody just asked, it's without dividends included, correct? But options are a limited supply because you can't just create options out of thin air. You actually have to be buying options on contracts that other people own. That's what you're doing. And so what's happening here is that's driven the cost of options up. So what's happened is while every like good IUL policy used to be involved with the S&P 500 index, now a lot of these companies have created this, whatever this is again, I don't remember, the Bloomberg Dynamic Balance PR2, whatever. Like they're creating all this because it's an engineered index that they only have access to buy options. What does that do? That creates lower cost options, which allows them to illustrate higher and create these no cap indexes, right? But the problem is they then inject other risks and fees and like multiplier fees and all these things that they illustrate really sexy, but on the back end, they create all these elements and fees that actually hurt the performance of the policy, right? Like, and so, so somebody asked, Time Creator asked, are there third-party charges, fees for managing the options? No, not really. That's included in the options budget. If you're doing like an S&P or a Russell 2000 or like a Dow Jones index, something like that, like the cost of the options is just kind of built into it. They don't charge a fee for that. Really, I mean, there are admin fees built into the contract. Every IUL policy is a little different. But when it comes to the engineered indexes, there's always extra fees included. And it's it gets you. It just adds to the negative impact of the policy.
So you basically ultimately got a vehicle you're putting money in where the cost of insurance is going up and the cost to play through the options is going up.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at it. So the cost of options, well, think about it this way. Cost of options could go up or down.
Yeah.
But if they're a supply demand product, the more volume you have and the less supply there is, the more the cost is going to go up. In addition to that, what happens to options? Like typically demand in the options market is driven by volatility because that's why people typically are speculating with options. IUL companies are not buying options the same way that a lot of these speculators are trying to hit risk. IUL companies are using it strictly as a hedging strategy, which means if you understand that concept of hedging, it's not to get big returns. It's not to outperform the market the way that all these people are talking about. It's just to like flatten out the curve, so to speak. And, when you look at the way these companies are doing it and you say, okay, like our options budget is what it is. And, it's a supply demand thing. Like the costs are going to go up. They're not getting massive returns. The cap rates and the par rates and all these charges are going to be dictated by the options budget and the options cost. So as the volatility goes up, right, a lot of people have been saying like, okay, it's one thing that we have more demand because of these IUL companies, but also as interest rates go up, a lot of people go, oh, well, the general fund's going to be performing better. So we're going to have a better options budget. Our options budget's going to go up by a couple percentage points, which is going to be great. That'll help us increase the cap rates or the par rates or whatever. But the bottom line is when interest rates go up, what happens to the economy? Volatility, uncertainty. That drives people to the options market, that drives up demand, which will drive up options costs. So typically, as the general fund budget is going up, what we're seeing is that the options costs are going up in sequence with it. So there's no real positive effect on the IUL cap rates and par rates.
Boy, you have a lot of agents probably now have to go to their upline and ask a lot of serious questions that are not going to be answered.
Well, but like, so this is a question or a statement that I get a lot is, Chris, well, you can't lose money due to market loss.
Right.
Right.
That's
and
awesome.
I say, okay, that's semantics and that's a half truth. And that's like, you know, like, and I hate half truths if anybody knows me. And what I say is, you're right. Technically speaking, because of the way the contract is written, you can't lose due to market loss because you have a 0% floor. However, the contract can lose money because of market loss. The difference between that due to and because of, think about it. Like, they basically mean the same thing, but you're saying, like, the due to is saying, all right, I'm not losing my money in the market, right? And the because of is saying, well, how is the policy going to perform if the market loses money? Because isn't that all that matters?
Yeah.
Right. And so if it can lose, it can lose, it can lose, right? Like, that's all that matters. And so somebody asked, are VULs better investment since they have real mutual funds in them? I would say no. VULs are, think about it this way. VULs are an insurance universal life chassis product, and they have variable investments like mutual funds that are built into them, right? And so when we look at the investment, the mutual funds, let's say, that are in there, there's then managed money fees inside of the VUL wrapper. You have the insurance costs inside of the UL wrapper, and the fees are typically higher for the mutual funds than you would pay just to buy those mutual funds outside. And then when the value can fluctuate greatly when you hit a down market in a VUL, because of the fees and because of the insurance costs injecting more risk into the VUL. I mean, I'm just not a big believer in them. Now, I would say, like, if you want to manage it, like, listen, here's no, I don't even want to go there. You should never mix your investments with insurance. You're never buying insurance for the purpose of investing. Insurance companies don't invest well. Insurance companies manage your risk. Insurance companies will get you the best possible return with the least amount of risk possible. That is what they do. It's a savings account on steroids. I think it should be a foundational asset for everybody at some point in time, once your debt is taken care of and your cash flow is good and all that stuff. But you should never look at life insurance companies to be your main source of investing, to be your main source of income, to be your, like, anything, because that's the other thing we haven't gotten to. Like, that's when we look at retirement, a lot of people are like, oh, tax-free retirement income, because of this stupid Patrick Kelly book, that was written 15 years ago. And, then you got people like David McKnight, who, this book that I'm working on doing a review, because, he decided to try to call me out on some stuff, and, like, this whole LIRP, like, life insurance retirement plan. This right here is the most dangerous thing you could ever imagine, because you can't do a life insurance retirement plan, because as soon as you start utilizing life insurance for income and retirement as the sole vehicle, or the predominantly main vehicle in your retirement plan, you are exposing yourself to so much more risk than you're aware of. The challenge is, in this book, Power of Zero, just gonna, like, he likes to call me out, so I'll call him out. Like, in this book, I agree with 90% of what he says. Like, the concepts, the philosophies, the challenges, the problems, all that stuff, I agree with. And there are other vehicles that he talks about that are, like Roth IRAs and other taxable vehicles. Okay. But the problem is, I know that the mission of this book is to sell IUL. The mission of that book is to lead people to this book. That's really what it comes down to. And that's the problem. When you start taking income and retirement from an IUL, you are injecting more risk into your financial life than you ever realized. And, that girl, Tootie, just said, I think, what did she say here? I think we need to get rid of the investment mentality when it comes to insurance. I could not agree more. If you think about it, what is the difference? Let's talk about this for a second. What's the difference between investing and saving?
Risk.
That's it. Function of risk. That's all it is. When we look at risk, what is risk? Risk is just simply a chance of loss, right? And so we don't ever want to use a life insurance company thinking about it as an investment, because we want to utilize the life insurance company as a banking alternative or as a savings alternative, We want it to be our emergency fund. I love life insurance when utilized as like a volatility buffer to be able to pull income out in retirement when needed in specific years. But your life insurance plan, whole life, that's why we use whole life, can be phenomenal when it comes to being part of a bigger plan, a more comprehensive strategy with other assets, whether it's real estate or stocks or like whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't care. Like, you know, that's a whole different video probably, but like, you know, my problem with IUL is not that IUL can't work in certain ways. It's got its use cases. The use cases just are not the tax-free income in retirement. Like, that's the problem with it. And that's my problem. Isn't that like IUL is a crappy product in every instance. My problem with IUL is it's a crappy product the way that 99.99999% of IUL agents sell it, right? And that's the challenge.
And that's how they're sold. I mean, I've been there, and I've heard years of agents selling IULs, and I still hear it now. It's this one all. Oh, I hate it when I hear it's the Swiss Army knife of retirement. Oh, when I hear that, it just makes me cringe. Because ultimately what they're selling is, you don't need your 401k, you don't need your Roth, you don't need your IRA. This solves all your problems. So
totally.
If you ever hear anybody say it's the Swiss Army knife, you should probably run the other direction for sure.
Totally. And somebody just made this comment. I've never read this book, Lapsed, about MetLife. I'm fascinated though. I've never even heard of this book. I'm going to go look for it now though. This is one of those things. Like, at the end of the day, I always kind of say this is a pretty bold, inflammatory statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. I just say IUL is like putting lipstick on a pig. Because if you look at history and you believe history has a habit of repeating itself, go look at the way, do research on articles and, you know, news stories and kind of the history about how traditional universal life was sold. And at the end of the day, it was an atrocity, and it completely blew up, and it had so many problems. And if you believe that IUL companies have your best interests at heart and are going to just look after you, and that they're moral companies, and why would an insurance company ever do something wrong to a policyholder? Go look at the history, probably that's talked about in that book, Lapsed. You know, MetLife demutualized. MetLife switched from a whole life company, integrated IUL, and had all sorts of problems. I didn't know there was a book on it, but like, that's kind of fascinating to me. They went from one of the best stable financial institutions in the world, and then, you know, they did a lot of their clients wrong, you know, and a lot of these companies did. You know, when I was at National Life Group, I ran into like lapsing policies all the time, you know, from people that were there. And if you think these companies are going to be like, no, like they're going to just look after you. No, they're not. Like, IUL is just a universal life product with an option strategy that I just described attached to it. If you put an IUL into the fixed indexing strategy or the fixed crediting strategy, you know what it is? It's traditional UL. That's all it is. That's all it is. And people think like, oh, that's really fascinating, right? Like, okay, like let's talk about that, because that's one of the arguments I get from agents, right? They go, well, Chris, IUL is like whole life, but enhanced. It's the improved whole life. It's the improved, the new and improved whole life. And so like, and then I heard somebody talk about this the other day, and I almost like peed my pants laughing because it was so pathetic. But like, it like, they were like, well, it's evolving. Like it's like technology evolves, and like, so you know, cell phones, it's like whole life is like a flip phone, and IUL is like a smartphone, right? Like the new iPhone. And I'm like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me! Like, this is the most pathetic argument I've ever heard in my life. Like, first of all, it's not a technology. Things don't advance. Like, the principles of money don't change, guys. I got news for you. Like, the principles of financial structure don't change. All they've done is injected more risk. Like, is there more flexibility? There are situations I could make an argument like IUL is a little bit more flexible, although I would also make an argument that you can design whole life to be almost as flexible. And I would argue, if you need that extra bit of flexibility, you probably shouldn't be putting your money into it anyway. You know what I mean? If like that extra little bit of flexibility that IUL will give you compared to whole life, if it's that vital that you have that extra amount of flexibility, unless you are like 1/10 of 1% of the population that is like maybe exiting a business, and maybe 3 years from now, you know, you're going to get this influx of capital and like whatever, then I could say maybe IUL, but I would even argue I could design that in a whole life policy as well. And like there's all these things to really like take into consideration. And it's like, I don't know. The whole idea that IUL is an enhanced version, and they go, well, because you get to participate in the index, and if I want, and if the market is crazy, I could just put it into the fixed index. Well, I got news for you. You put it into the fixed index, it's not comparing to a whole life. It's like a traditional UL, and ULs have already failed. ULs have already like had lapse issues and legal issues and all these different things. And so, you know, you have to understand the concepts of how the illustrations work, the concepts of net amount at risk, the concepts about the fact that you have an annual renewable term chassis inside of an IUL, inside of a UL policy. That's what it is. It's an annual renewable term policy. So what happens is every year you get older, the insurance gets more expensive because you're older, the risk is higher. And then you have to function in the net amount at risk. And, you know, then when we start talking about, when you start talking about the fact that, you know, now when we get into retirement, we're going to start taking income, and we're going to start taking loans, and most people do index loans, you know, then, you know, what those loan balances accumulate. If we want, we can look at an illustration. I could show you, but like, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like, it's like, there's so many angles. Like here's my challenge with this is that there's like the only way. So okay, let me take a step back. I'm getting a little riled up here. So here's my challenge. I get it. You sold IUL for a decade. I sold IUL and a lot of it for 4 years. I was a director of business development for one of the top IUL companies. When I first got into, like, I've shared my story a couple times, but I left a guaranteed multiple six-figure position, taking over as a succession plan for my father-in-law for his investment business, to sell IUL, because when I learned about IUL, I believed in it so much that I was like, I can't do this. I didn't believe in the traditional investment methodologies anymore, because I got a job with an insurance company just to be a stopgap to go with him. And then when I learned about IUL, I bought the bait, hook, line, sinker so hard that I was like, father-in-law, I can't do this with you because I don't believe in what you're doing. I need to go. IUL is the golden goose, baby. Like, this is it, you know? And so you can imagine the humble pie that I had to eat 4.5 years later when I went to him and I said, oh, by the way, I'm leaving this company because everything I told you I left for, like, I don't believe in anymore, you know, like. And then he's like, oh, you're going to come work with me. I'm like, no. Like, things haven't changed that much. Like, it's whole life that I thought I realized. And he's like, whole life. And, you know, he's a traditional investment guy, so he just doesn't get it still to this day, no matter how much success I have and all that stuff. He just doesn't get it. But, you know, and he's retired now anyway, and sold his book of business to somebody else. So, you know, everybody's happy. But, you know, that said, I get what it's like when you get in this business and you want to help people. I got in this business, I wanted to help people. I got in this business, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? Yeah. And so I started selling it, and I sold a lot of it. And then, you know, a lot of my passion now comes from the fact that I want to be able to teach people what I learned and compress that time frame and reach people sooner than I was able to be reached, sooner than, you know, it took you a decade, right? Like, that's tricky, right? And so there's that. So I don't begrudge people for selling it and believe in it. But is it Mark Twain, you know, it said, it's not what you don't know that's the problem, it's what you think you know that just ain't so, right? And when we come at it from that perspective, the way that these IMOs are teaching people about how IUL kind of should be sold, it's not teaching you how the product works. It's teaching you a kitschy sales, you know, script that will sell a lot of policies, but will also blow up in people's faces from a long-term perspective, and that will have damaging effects on your relationships. And you know, I know this because I've had it happen to me. You know, and you know, to me, it's a very personal conversation, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And so, you know, I guess it's like, so I don't begrudge people, but I would also say, you know, our job is to learn and really know what we're doing. So I give people a little bit of grace. You get in the business, you want to help people, you want to learn about it, but at some point in time, you got to become a professional, like, and being a professional means learning and knowing your stuff, and not just following your upline because they say, hey, if you want to make money, do this. I'm a big believer. You got to lead from the front. You got to spend money on mentorship. If you haven't gone through and done your own research and done third-party stuff, like, go to lifeproductreview.com. There's nothing in it for me to suggest you to go do that, except for I think you're going to be better served and be a better educated, whether you work with Life180 or work independently, you're going to understand this stuff on a deeper level. And I think that's what we need. There's too much confirmation bias in this business where people like want to do this and they like, let's face it, the more IUL you sell when you first start in this business, the more challenging it is to look for reasons that you're wrong, because that creates a bigger problem for you, right? And so, like, that's the hard part. We need to start like being critical thinkers right out of the gate, and looking for, I would say, and that's one of the things I think that I don't know, as a human being, I guess a bit unique. And I know you're the same way, is like, I'm always looking for reasons that I'm wrong. Like I'm always looking to play devil's advocate. And a lot of people think like, oh, Chris, you're just doing this content on whole life or on anti-IUL to sell more of your product. No, like, just so you know, I sold IUL. I got into a lawsuit with the company that I sold it for after the fact. I had to give up my license just to avoid getting sued again, so I could keep talking about it. I walked away from the ability to make money in this business so I could keep making content to help people and educate people. I had nothing in it for me. For 4.5 years, I created content to educate people, and I could not sell anything. I just got my license again like 5 months ago, right? Go look at the history of my channel. I've been creating videos, and the only reason I got my license again and created the agency was based on demand of people being like, oh my gosh, thanks for opening my eyes. Can you help me? Nobody else out there is able to help me. And so that's, I've met you and other people like you, and now we're doing what we're doing. LifeProductReview.com, LifeProductReview.com. Go check it out. Bang. That is a guy named Bobby Samuelson. I've actually interviewed the author, or the guy who runs that site. But it's the most unbiased site. Bobby doesn't sell life insurance. He is not, he's got no skin in the game. He gets paid by whole life companies and IUL companies to speak, to design products. He used to be one of the product design people at MetLife, ironically, for the person who wrote Lapsed. So he's seen the good, the bad, the ugly of this, and he's not anti-IUL. He's just all about really understanding what you put your money into, and he does specific product design or product analysis, and he does overall industry analysis of what he's seeing from a sales tactic perspective and all this stuff. I think it's $100 a month to be on that. But I'll tell you right now, it's the best $100. I think if you're in this business and you're not spending $100 a month to like learn stuff like that from the best of the best, you shouldn't be in this business, because you can't really serve people. If you're not willing to invest in yourself to be the best you can be, then you shouldn't be giving people advice for their money.
So true.
That's hard. I mean, it's a harsh truth. I'm pretty hardcore about this stuff. But it is what it is, I feel like we have a responsibility. The challenge with a lot of these IMOs, they're like, oh, like, let's sell on the dream and let's sell. It's so narcissistic. It's pathetic, right? It's like, let me show you how you can build your own business and you could drive a Ferrari or like a Ghost, Rolls Royce Ghost, or like, an Audi A8, or like whatever it is. Like, let's get you a supercar and let's get you financial freedom and you can build a team. How about like that's all focused on you. If you're getting in this business focused on you getting a supercar and making all this money and you reaching financial freedom, like, go do something else, please. You're making my life hard. Okay. Go do something else. If you want to truly help people Figure out how to build yourself into the best asset that you can be to add the most value to the most amount of people possible, because money follows value, and your money in your life is going to be directly correlated to your ability to add value into other people's lives. If you want to do this the right way, that's how you got to go about this. But you got to be willing to go slow to go fast in that regard. You got to invest in yourself up front. Now, you can dupe people. You can kind of like trick people or sell people on half truths by just showing people an illustration and making it look really attractive and tell them that they're conservative assumptions. And you'll sell a lot and you'll make a lot and you'll probably build a downline and recruit people. And it'll be like the blind leading the blind, because you'll be recruiting people and training people into something that you don't fully understand yourself, you know, and that'll work for a minute. But, you know, we're here in Arizona, right? I was just listening to, I was dropping my kids off this morning. This is going to be a relative to some people it won't, but I think everybody will understand. They were talking about the Arizona Cardinals on Sports Talk Radio as I'm driving home. And we're talking about Steve Keim. Steve Keim, the general manager of the Arizona Cardinals. And if for everybody who doesn't know, like the Cardinals right now are in a legal case right now because Steve Keim got a DUI, an extreme DUI as the general manager of the Cardinals. They suspended him to, you know, because like, hey, we gotta do the right thing. So we're going to suspend the GM because he acted out of alignment with our values as an organization. So they suspended him on paper, but then they got 4 burner phones to allow communication behind the scenes, right? And now they're in trouble for it, right? Like, and so it is what it is. And so it's interesting, like the deception that happened. But the funny thing that the Sports Talk guys said that I was like, oh my God, it's like an IUL agent. And it's literally the first thing that came to my mind. This is how my brain works, guys. Like, I don't know what to tell you. They're talking about the GM of the Cardinals, and this is where I go. But they were like, he was here for 10 years as the GM. The first 5 years were some of the best 5 years. They went to the Super Bowl. He hit awards. He had all this success, but he did it kind of based on the back of the reputation of the person that built the foundation before him, right? I.e., Whole Life built the foundation and reputation for IUL, that they're selling on this whole concept because IUL is still a financial experiment. And then when like the 5 years happened, they made it to the Super Bowl. They did really well. He hit all these awards, i.e. IUL agents come in, they have a lot of success, they sell a lot of stuff, and it looks really good. And they were like, the 5 first years that Steve Keim was here were the best years ever. The last 5 were some of the worst 5 years the general managers have ever experienced in a lot of ways. And that's what's going to happen with IUL agents, right? Like you sell a lot, you feel a lot until you start having these policies mature a little bit, and you got to deal with annual reviews, and you got to deal with actually having accountability to what you sold and what you told people, and like the misrepresentations and I'm not saying you're intentionally misrepresenting or misleading. You just don't know what you don't know, you know, and that's going to lead to a lot of problems. And I left IUL and started doing Whole Life because I made a conscious decision for myself that I never wanted to have to tell any of my clients I was sorry ever again. And I wanted to be able to not focus on where they took their risk. You know, I want to focus on building their foundation. Brian's here. That's funny. Your annual reviews have been smooth. Yeah, I mean, Brian, I'll believe you when I can take a look at your portfolio with you and look at all the in-force illustrations. And my guess, Brian, is you've been doing it for 2 or 3 or 4 years. You have, like anybody that's been doing IUL for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, like it becomes a problem. That's the challenge. Most people selling IULs that think they know it and they think they got the system gamed. IULs have been bailed out by the greatest bull run of all time, period. That's why I created the IUL challenge. The product is sold on upside potential and downside protection, right? But the problem is upside potential compared to what, right? Like that means when the market went through the biggest bull run of all time, if they're sold on conservative assumptions, every policy should have outperformed because you got upside potential. Mm-hmm. Why hasn't anybody won the IUL challenge yet? I'm willing to give somebody $2,000 just to show me one example. So Brian, talk to me in 10 years, once you got policies that have hit, you know, actually at a surrender period and have seen different markets. You know, you've been selling, you know, I don't think I know it. I know it. Your challenge only pertains to agents who've been doing it for 10. Yeah, it pertains to agents. Exactly. You don't know what you don't know. There's no history of what you're doing. You have no proof. That's my point. Like You're talking about something that you're giving an opinion about something and putting it as fact. And I'm looking at history and showing it as fact. Like, that's fact. You're speculative. You're speculative about what you're talking about. You don't know anything about that. Like, you're speculating, period. Like, that's not a debate. Like, you are going on variables that have been a very short period of time. And there are variables in the policy that the companies can change. Historically, they will change, and they have changed. And so, like, you're going on certain assumptions. That is speculation. I'm just saying, all right, let's get rid of the speculation. Let's look at how this product as a whole has performed over the long run. And when the policies have been there long enough, they don't work. They just don't work. And I've seen it thousands. And when I say thousands of times, I mean thousands of times, right? And Brian, I'm not saying an IUL can't work either, by the way. That's not the point. I didn't create the IUL challenge to be like, it's impossible for an IUL to work. I created the IUL challenge to take the conversation to the next level, because if one policy works out of 100 sold, still a problem. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's do this. This is gonna be fun. All right, so all right. You know what? So when it comes to the IUL challenge, this is the purpose. This is the biggest, I guess, pushback I get. And it's honestly the thing that drives me the most nuts, because people just don't understand it. So I'm gonna maximize my screen again, and I'm gonna go over here, and we're gonna talk about this, because this is so important for people to understand. So a lot of times people go, all right, actually, you know what I want to do? I want to do this. I'm gonna go here. I want to look at it. I'm gonna just use this illustration as an example, just to kind of give context. And then I'm going to go look at a whole life illustration just to give context. I don't know if this is the right area or not. No, that's the guaranteed scenario. I want to look at the non-guaranteed. I got to find the non-guaranteed scenario here. I don't know where it is. Let me see here. Maybe here. Current scenario. All right. So, that's policy 26. Let me go here. All right. So once again, this isn't the best design policy, but that's not the point. A lot of times people go, well, if you bash on the low interest rate environments hurt both, but if the interest rate environment goes up, it helps whole life, not IUL, period. I've talked about that earlier, because as interest rate environments go up, it hurts the options market. It increases options costs. It'll increase the options budget for an IUL, but that's not all that matters. There's a lot more moving parts in an IUL. You have to look at the options budget. And that's why go to the lifeproductreview.com. Bobby Samuelson does this amazing index of the indexes, where he actually shows what is the price of an 8%. What's the price of an 8% cap? Like how much based on options cost is an 8% cap cost? The problem is a lot of people are using these engineered indexes that are full of holes and full of problems that are full of misrepresentations of what the future will hold. So a lot of people will say, Chris, like, how are you going to insult this, so to speak, and say like the current assumption can't be used in an IUL, but you can use a current assumption inside of a whole life policy? Well, the reason is because there are variables here that can be changed, right? And so it's just like, once again, I'm just going to go through. You pay your premium, it goes into the general fund, that creates the options budget. That options budget then has to buy options based on the cost of the options, and the options budget and the options cost are the two things that lead to the cap rates, par rates, spread charges. And a lot of people will say, all right, I have a no cap rate with no par rate. Well, then there's always a risk-free rate, RFR, which is basically the 10-year treasury note, right? Which is about 5% right now. And so this is all in place. And then when you use indexes that are engineered, there's also other fees and other things that come into play, right? Like for doing that. Caps are going up. No, caps are like there have been a couple situations with caps going up on certain companies with new money, new products that are going in because they're using only new money. But I promise you, as those caps go up, as time goes on, those products, they will drop those products. I remember a time where caps on IULs were 16.5 to 18%, period. So I really don't care. Once again, the reason I don't like IUL, it's a function of control, right? Like I don't want to be in control. I don't want the insurance company to be in control of my success. And a lot of people go, oh, well, and Brian, you probably argue this, right? Like, oh, that's fine. Like the company, why would they ever do anything bad to you? They're like, and take the kind of like moral high ground of an insurance company. Look at the history of traditional UL and how they handled it. And it's atrocious. Somebody said there was a book called Lapsed on MetLife, which is pretty fascinating. I got to go read that. I didn't even know it existed. But like, that is what it is. And so, okay, so low vol, yeah. So anyway, even with the S&P 500, like the problem is IUL companies have created their own problem because you got more money chasing a limited amount of options available. And so that drives up the cost of options. So as the options budget goes up, the more popular IUL is getting, the more it's creating its own problem on the options cost. So that is what it is. So these are the fees. And like, to get back to the point here, these are the things that really matter. It doesn't matter what the S&P 500 does. Like, for instance, assuming like this isn't the S&P 500 index on this policy, but assuming as it were, it wouldn't matter what the S&P 500 does. It matters what's the options budget, what's the options cost, because that sets these things. Because the S&P 500 could perform at whatever level, the index could perform at whatever level, but the participation in that performance is going to be based on these things, which is dictated by these two functions, right? Like, I don't know how else to plainly put it. That's how this works, and that's all that matters. So when people go, oh, why is this not okay? Why can't you bank on this? And the answer is because, you know what? At the end of the day, when we look at this, these functions have been always manipulated and moved by the insurance companies. And once again, the IUL challenge, they didn't perform the greatest bull run of all time. What's going to happen when we have less than the greatest bull run of all time? Now, what I want to do, what I want to do is I want to go here. I'm going to find a whole life illustration from like an old, these are all my slides that I have for stuff that I've done. Let me see if I can find just a current assumption. All right, so let's just use this. It'll be easy enough. All the content that I have here. So I'm just going to erase this just to have something to work with. So now if we look at this, can you see that okay? Yeah. So if we look at this and we say, all right, Chris, why are you comfortable focusing on the non-guaranteed portion of a whole life policy? Because everything in a whole life policy is fixed and guaranteed, except for the dividend, period. So with an IUL, there are all these variables that the insurance company can change on the non-guaranteed side, right? With a whole life policy, the only variable that's involved in the non-guaranteed side is whether or not they pay a dividend, period. And so what I can say now is in the past, whole life policies have performed worse because, over the past 40 years, here, let me do this. Over the past 40 years, interest rates were at 19, they went down here and then they flattened out, right? And so what happened is if you bought a policy in 1990 and the dividend showed 10%, and then dividend rates kept going down. Well, when you look at the current assumption, it's based on 100% of current dividend scale. So it would be saying, when you look at that illustration, it's assuming 10% of the current dividend scale. So if I bought that policy in 1990, it's going to show 10% dividends being assumed. So as dividend rates went down, so there too did the performance of the actual policy. But anybody that bought that and didn't understand it, it's not a function of the same thing. Remember, we're not buying whole life as an investment alternative. We're buying it as a savings alternative. And so the rates are going to follow kind of the fixed market. That's what whole life does. So what happens then is now we are in a spot where interest rates are going up, or they have been going up. I'll go back here again. So as interest rates, these are dividend rates. What happened is interest rates were going down. dividend rates change. Dividend rates chase interest rates, right? So as interest rates were going down, dividend rates were going down, and there's this gap, right? It's positive. So as interest rates go up, dividend rates will then go up as well. Dividend rates historically always will follow. Now there's a little bit of a tail. So now I can look at this illustration, and this is just a company with a 5.2% dividend. As dividend rates go up, I'm looking at this. This non-guaranteed is assuming that there's a dividend paid. They've paid a dividend for 120 plus years consecutively, never missed. Can never say that that's going to happen in IUL. And then we can say that it's assuming only the lowest dividend rate that they've ever had for every year. So I can look at this net cash value with a non-guarantee at the 5.2%, and I can say, well, if dividend rates go up, there's a strong chance that this policy actually outperforms what we're looking at, right? So I'm always making decisions. What's the upside? What's the downside? Can I live with the downside, right? And I want to never tell my clients I'm sorry. You have data on the path setter since its inception. Like, I don't care about your data. I want specific instances. Like, simulate. You can't simulate anything. You can't, like, this is the garbage I deal with all the time. Like, people, oh, I could simulate and create a spreadsheet and this and that, whatever. Like, get over it. Find somebody that's done it with that product. Period. If that path setter product is so amazing and it can be done, find a mentor, which I assume you have, that you worked with, that introduced you to this and got you to the concept, that has sold one of those policies. And I tell you what, if you do that, I will give you $5,000, Brian. Find one. Find a policy with a original illustration and an enforced one, and show me where it at least matches it over that period of time. I don't want simulations. I want actual results, because guess what? Life doesn't exist on a spreadsheet. Life exists in real life, and how people operate and live and behave, and what these things are actually doing. All right. Talk, Matt. I'm like, please, like, I need a break. You talk for a second. I'm exhausted.
Oh boy. This one makes it fun. I think this one makes it fun because, you got people that are just really stuck in their ways. And I think it's better to look at things objectively than, simulations and hypotheticals. But I think your challenge is pretty easy. And it's really sad that no one has won the challenge. I mean, when I first met you, that was the first thing I did. Is I've sold IULs for basically over a decade, and I looked at all my clients over those years. And I know everybody says, oh, but it has to be structured properly. That's like the new thing. Because I think what's happening is you have a lot of IUL agents and then new people getting into the IUL space, kind of impeding on their clients. So IUL agents has been around for a while. What they're saying is, oh, don't buy an IUL unless it's structured properly. That's like the new saying now, because you have IUL agents going against IUL agents and all this stuff. But, I looked at all of my clients' policies and stuff like that. I mean, none of them performed better than the original illustration. Not one.
And that's the thing. That's the thing. No matter how you structure it, it's still going to underperform, and that's the problem compared to whatever you structure it as. So I'm showing. Okay, so Brian asked, what was dividends being showed 10 years ago? Every company's a little bit different. Anywhere between 6.5 and 7.5, typically. Period. And that is what it is. So dividends have come down. And so therefore, policy performance on the current assumption for whole life will perform worse. That's just the way it is. Here's my problem. And when people ask why I get so fired up about IUL, it's because of the fact that, first and foremost, I believe that whole life insurance is an amazing asset. And I think it's a savings alternative, not an investment alternative. And I think whole life gets lumped in with IUL because of all the bad marketing tactics that are happening with IUL. And I think all the bad marketing, all the bad design, all the bad expectations, all the bad illustrations, the lack of performance, the illustrative games that the companies, by the way, the companies are the problem that are teaching the agents this stuff. And that will, that's going to lead to a lot of illustration regulation. And if my challenge is, it's going to lead to a lot of reform in the cash value life insurance space in general, and all the negativity from IUL is going to have an overflow spillover effect, and negatively impact whole life insurance and what we're able to do in a positive way. And so when I get fired up, I do agree. I think any IUL reform, put it this way, if you are able to sell an IUL without by explaining exactly every moving part and sell it without showing an illustration, well, God bless you. Have fun. I could sell a whole life without showing an illustration, all day long. Easy peasy, no problem, because the story makes sense and the risk factors make sense. The values are in alignment with what most people want to accomplish in their life. It just is what it is. And when you look at it from that perspective, I'm not a 1090 fan. Honestly, 1090s work sometimes, but I'm like, so just that statement alone, I'm not a huge 1090 fan. I'm not a huge any design fan. You know what I'm a fan of? The policy that's designed to meet your goals and objectives. Steve overlooks a lot of the downsides of 1090s. And there are plenty of times where a 1090 makes sense. And there are plenty of times a 1090 doesn't make sense, right? I'll tell you what, I own policies. I don't own personally one 1090 policy personally, because it's not in alignment with what my goals and needs and objectives are and what I want to accomplish long-term. I did a video the other day, Brian, it was like a couple of weeks ago, on 6 things to consider when buying a life insurance policy. And when you consider these 6 things, you realize it's not just about the design and the 1090 thing, period. We got to start thinking about, like, what is the problem that we're looking to solve, and what is, then we can back our way into the solution. And we can't commoditize these things and sell IULs on spreadsheets and sell whole life insurance on 1090 illustrations, because people have no long-term vision. It's our job to lead and to help people understand what they're actually dealing with, what their problems and challenges, and kind of like what they're going to be dealing with in the future, and to think long-term. If it is what it is utilizing the leverage on financial institution who has 10 times the leverage of a bank. Yeah, I mean, I think cash value life insurance, having the leverage of so you say is utilizing the leverage of a financial institution who has 10 times the leverage of a bank. I'd say they're 10 times more stable than a bank. I don't know if they have more leverage than a bank. I would say banks are ultimately more leveraged. And I guess because they have use less leverage, they have more leverage because they have more liquidity, which creates leverage and opportunity. But yeah, solvency. There you go. We're on the same page. So I would say, it's all about financial structure. That's what it's all about. It's about setting yourself up to be an investor. And that's my problem with IUL compared to whole life, is, principally speaking, IUL is a zero-sum game. It's a win-lose scenario that, you put your money in and you're either going to win or lose. And there's not like much in between. Whole life insurance, I can look at the downside, I can look at the guarantees, and I focus on utilizing the whole life policy not to be my investment, but to be the foundational asset that helps me invest in myself and helps me find investments outside of the policy. Whereas when I use an IUL policy and it's injecting more risk into that process, and I'm taking risk in the policy, which is not where I want to take risk. I want to take risk in other assets and other investments in myself, in things that I can control, not the policy. Whereas whole life, it's got that foundation. IUL doesn't, and then I'm a big believer in the journey, in us becoming, like the phrase, like, you are where you are because of who you are. Like, we need to grow as people. We need to invest in ourselves. Putting money into an IUL, you're still having the same conversation of buy and hold and contribute and wait and take your income out 30 years from now. And, that's not the conversation I believe in. That's not the conversation that works historically. Look at where we are right now with the people that have been planning according to that. You have a fixed rate. Some companies are, yeah, but fixed rates. This is Brian. God, do you hear yourself, dude? Like you must not have been here. 5.3% fixed rate. If you put an IUL into a fixed rate, it is a UL, y'all. Like it is not like, ooh, like IUL is whole life on steroids because you get the index and then you get the fixed rate. Put it into a fixed rate, it's a UL. That's all it is. I think UL has done a good enough job showing that it's a bag of garbage. Like, period. Maximize the ART chassis. Like, you can't maximize. Like, the only way you maximize the ART chassis is if you actually reduce the net amount at risk, which over time will reduce the costs of insurance. But the problem is, as soon as you start taking income in retirement and you use index loans, or even if you use wash loans, you start losing the ability to do that. And so then it's annual renewable term as you get older, and it eats into everything, and the problem blows up. Like, as soon as you start taking loans in retirement, and that is my big problem with IUL, by the way, Brian. IUL, you and I can agree to disagree, whatever. Like, I guess it's the most insignificant portion of our argument with each other on IUL is how does it perform between, like, if I were to buy one right now, the most insignificant part of our arguments against each other, Brian, would be like, how does this policy perform over the next 20 years? Even though I've created the IUL challenge, even though I focus on that, even though they will underperform during that period of time compared to how they're sold, that's the most insignificant period of time during the policy. As soon as you start taking loans against it for retirement income, that is where the wheels come off of IUL. That is where the risks get like just catapulted into the stratosphere. Net risk is easier to manage in an ART chassis. No, like, Brian, no, wrong. Net risk, like, okay, so here's what I believe. We need certainty in life. Like, when there's certainty and we know we have measurable objectives, and this works in every area. Like, I'm going to break it down in a couple different ways. In my marriage, right? When I know there's certainty in my marriage and my relationship is wrong, or my relationship is right, then I can show up more powerfully and I can take different risks because I know it's safe. When I know there's certainty in the economy, I can take risks in business knowing that the certainty is there for me to go and do this. When there's certainty in my personal finances and I have a foundation of certainty, then I can go and then take risks elsewhere, and I have this foundation. That certainty is created. IUL removes that certainty from the foundational elements of our personal finances, and it injects risk there where we need certainty, and we want to go take the risks outside of that. Okay, so he's saying he's not wrong. It's factual, not opinion. No, that's your opinion. It absolutely, managing your net amount at risk. You start a whole life, I'll start at the end of 20 years, winner takes all. Okay. That's just like, I'm going to be living in a different country in 20 years. So with all of my policies and all the real estate I bought, thinking like yeah, anyway. Net amount at risk. Let's talk about this. I'm trying to think about how to articulate this. So that's why I'm going a little slow for a second. With whole life insurance, well, let me just, this is probably the best way to do it here. So here's the deal. With this, I'm just going to look at this whole life product real quick, just to kind of give an idea. So this is something that I did for liquidity that I put 110,000 in, just as an example. It's got net cash value of 101,000 starting in year 1. Year 2, 10,000. It's growing by 10,000. Once again, this is not designed to be an investment. This is designed to be a foundational asset that I can leverage and borrow against for real estate, for other investments, and whatever. So when I talk about certainty, I'm also talking about certainty of the variables that go into my assets, right? Like, so if I want to use this for real estate, a lot of people are like, oh, IULs are like infinite banking on steroids because I can borrow and I can earn arbitrage. Well, infinite banking is not about arbitrage. Cash flow hacking is not about arbitrage. It's about the certainty. I know that the loan rate versus the dividend rate, I'm always going to have a measurable variable that I can do when I take loans, right? With IUL, I take loans, it injects infinitely more risk into the policy. That's just a fact, right? And so I need the certainty in anything I'm doing, and utilizing this asset right here and leveraging this for real estate, and you combine the cash value after the loans, after the payback, and then the real estate value, it's going to absolutely annihilate any potential projection. And I got into an argument with Curtis Ray about this a long time ago with his MPI plan and all that crap. Like the potential that IUL has can't even come close to the foundational asset combined with real estate or any kind of cash flowing asset. So when we look at this, we want the measurables, but now let's just talk about net amount at risk. So there's a term rider here. That's where this comes into play. And so what happens is you can see at this year, the term rider drops off, okay? But now you can see when we're talking about net amount at risk, we always have the insurance need. The good news is for whole life insurance is that net amount at risk is built in. And when we're using paid up additions, that fee is spread over a period of time. MPI is scary. But if you believe MPI is scary, Brian, then you should believe that taking loans against the policy injects more risk, because the only problem with MPI, like the biggest problem, is that they're taking loans so early and they're leveraging those loans in the way they are. And so if the loans weren't as dangerous as I'm saying they are, then MPI wouldn't be a problem. MPI would technically work, right? That's the problem. And so think about like what you're saying there. When you acknowledge MPI is scary, what you're acknowledging is the relock feature of an MPI, which is borrowing against it to get more insurance, is the problem. It's over leveraging. Yeah, it's but eventually you're going to over leverage an IUL policy as well if you go according to how they're illustrating for income. But anyway, getting back to the point here. So you see the term rider drops off. So we have 347,000 in cash value, 709. The cost of insurance is spread out over a longer period of time. Whole life insurance costs are higher earlier, but they're going to be cheaper later because they're leveled out. That's how they do it. Now you can see that the cash value goes up, but so there does the death benefit. So we always have kind of a similar net amount at risk that's baked into this. And as the cash value goes up, the death benefit goes up. And that's what we're looking for, because paid up PUAs, which is what increases the cash value going up, are paid up additional permanent insurance. That's the key. No annual renewable term, no variables, no things that could go away, no ways that this can blow up. Not only that, is that I have more control, because if at any point in time I want to, like say at 65 here, I run into a situation where I'm like, cash flow sucks, or like something happens and I just want to pay this up. I could reduce the death benefit, pay up, have the cash value there, get rid of all fees, all expenses, all that stuff. In an IUL, you can never pay it up. Once your base is locked, you're locked. Yeah, okay, that's fair. Once my base is locked, so design it so the base is flexible. And if you're not locked, you always have the ability to reduce paid up the policy. You always have the ability to use a premium offset. There's more flexible on that. Companies do not disclose fees and costs of insurance. Who cares? Because what I see is what I get. Like that is the most basic argument, that it just doesn't matter. That's you're focusing on IUL is more transparent because they show all the fees. They show the fees on an IUL because they got to show the asterisk that those fees are not guaranteed and they can be changed to the betterment of the, that it can be changed to the betterment of the insurance company. That is why IUL is transparent, because of the fact that they have to legally be transparent because of all the variables that can be changed. They have to let you know about those things. Whole life doesn't show it because what you see is what you get. The only variable is, are they going to pay a dividend? Okay, they've paid a dividend 120 plus years straight, consecutively. So that's first off. And then B, what is the dividend they're going to pay? Period. What I'm showing now I look at it, boom. Let's go off maximum cost of insurance understanding net risk. Guess what? Still a damn good. I guess I don't understand where you're coming from that perspective. IUL, like over the life, if the person lives long enough, I'll tell you what, here's where IUL is better from an insurance cost. If you die soon, if you die in your 50s or 60s, IUL will get you more insurance, costs will be less. But if you live to your 80, 85, 90, IUL is going to cost more than whole life insurance over the period of time, period. RPUs, premium offsets, all these different things. Yes. So Thomas, it can save people. The fact is, once again, I want to be in control. I want the flexibility and the options of control. And when I design a whole life policy and I know I have the ability to control the moving parts, I know I can design the policy. This is an important part about working with an agent that knows what they're doing. I know I can design a policy that gives me the flexibility of control, that I can set a base that I'm comfortable with, and I can set a max level PUA side. So I have a spread, a margin that I can fund somewhere in between for that premium. I know that I have the ability, if money gets tight, that I can use a premium offset feature to provide more flexibility in the policy that would function very similar to how an IUL works. I know that I can use a reduced paid up feature in the policy if I hit retirement and I want to reduce all the costs and fees. And that is what it is. And then, I know that I have the control. As long as I meet my obligations for the policy, all the rules in the policy are set to my advantage. It's kind of, I use this example. If I got into business with you, Matt, I said, hey, Matt, like you got two options. You got the option to go work with Brian, who's chatting with us. And Brian says, hey, Matt, man, I got upside with you. I look at this business. Look at this business plan, i.e. the illustration. Look at this business plan. Look at this upside. Look, here's the deal. I got to sell you this. Like, you should get in business with me because, like, look at what I can do for you. And then you say, that's great. Well, what's your actual results in business, Brian? And Brian goes, oh, well, I've got all these spreadsheets and algorithms and like look backs and simulations that I can do that show you I'm awesome. Well, that's great. But talk to me about the actual results that have happened in your business. And he goes, oh, well, like let's not focus on that. But like, I promise you I can get like, and as soon as you sign on the dotted line with Brian, you're giving all control of the success of this business over to him, even though, and I'm picking on Brian right now, but I'm talking about the insurance company, not Brian specifically. Even though there's basically a 40-year history of these businesses not performing between UL, VUL, and IUL. The UL chassis is the thing that matters, right? So you have that even though they show a little more upside, they've got a history of not working. And then you go and say, all right, let's look at whole life, and let's look at another business. And we say, hey, let's take a look. Let's take a look at this and say, all right, there's less upside. It might not perform as well, but Matt, as soon as you sign on the dotted line with me, you're in control. Like, the only thing, as long as you do your side of the contract and you pay the premium, all the other features are guaranteed, lockstep, the return, like my job is to make you whole, period. Remember, with an IUL, you are a profit center. You are a profit center of the company. With a whole life policy, you are a participating member of the company that participates in the profits of the company. You want the company to be profitable. That means your dividend is higher, right? With an IUL, you're a profit center. IULs are the most profitable product that life insurance companies have. That is just the way it is. Go subscribe to Life Product Review and look it up, right? You can't exchange out if the carrier doesn't behave. All control. All control 10. So like, I'm not sure, Brayton, are you like referring to like Ohio National, for instance? Yeah, I mean, there are situations like I had an Ohio National policy, right? Ohio National demutualized. So you got a 1035 exchange at that point in time. But IUL, like 1035, you can't 1035 typically during surrender period because like, you're only going to be able to 1035 surrender values. You can if the policy is old enough, mature enough, whatever, yeah, you can 1035. I think the best thing somebody could do if they're stuck in an IUL right now is probably 1035 into an indexed annuity for income, because those are actually made for income. And you can do that. Okay. So, but the surrender rider, but once again, so the surrender rider always comes at a cost. The surrender rider will be great for the short-term liquidity, but it injects more costs and fees and inefficiencies later in the policy. Once again, agent is key. Like, it all comes down to control. It all comes down to control, period. With an IUL, you don't have the control. Like, and if you're into that, if you're into somebody else, like if you're into a company that has a 40-year history of underperforming in a certain way with a platform of a UL chassis product, if you're into putting your money into places and products that have a history of underperforming, well, God bless you, have fun, good luck. I'm going to put my money in a place into an asset that's been guaranteed, that's performed for 180 years, that, I'm going to have liquidity of, that I can go take risk in other places. Period. That's all I have to say on that. I don't know what to say. Matt, help me out.
Well, I think what one of the comments, I'll educate on how it actually works. And I think with whole life, it's easy. Like here's a downside, here's the upside. You know exactly what you get, right?
Yep.
I guarantee, like if any IUL agent came and talked to any of my clients, they couldn't move them into an IUL. But if I talk to all your clients that you just sold an IUL to before they signed the dotted line, and I told them all the downside, I don't think a lot of them would actually move forward. So
the tragedy,
IUL agents really talk much about the downside.
They don't. And the tragedy behind that is I've seen so many whole life policies that are 7, 8, 9, 10 years old that just got through the capitalization phase where they're starting to be really efficient, and people sold them an IUL and got them to 1035 out of the whole life policy to put it into an IUL, and it is what it is. Like they move into an IUL, and the IUL agent just showed them an illustration, and they bought based on the illustration, but that's not real life, and then people call me up and they're like, oh my gosh, I just did this and I found your videos, and it's pretty bad. We could do a set amount of clients to keep it fair. So Brian, remember, for me to do it, I'll have to go with one of the agents that I've been coaching or training, because I didn't even have my license to sell until 4.5 months ago. I left the industry and I've been focusing on just training people and teaching people how to do this. But I could go get one of the agents I've been working on, that I've worked closely with on that, to probably do that. But at the end of the day, like, once again, Brian, your book isn't old enough to deal with. Like man, it's so frustrating, Matt. Like how people that have been doing this for 3 years, 4 years, think they got it all figured out and think they know everything about these products that, like, I know, Brian, you got like good intentions, and I know like you and I like talk a bunch. It's like I truly believe you're at least doing what you believe is true, and I will say this: out of all the IUL agents that I've ever talked to, Matt, Brian, I believe, is probably one of the best, right? Like as far as like doing it the right way, probably looking out for his clients, probably just probably the risk is mitigated as much as possible, but it doesn't eliminate the risk, and that's the challenge, right? Like when you look at that, and we talk about what is the purpose of this product, we don't want risk inside of the insurance policy, period, because Brian's going to do this, for instance, and he could probably manage it and deal with it and whatever the entire time. But I got to tell you, now the person's success, let's talk about it this way: the person's success and being successful with their IUL is based on Brian being here to manage it with them. What happens if Brian retires or gets killed in a car accident or something like that? That person is in a product that's completely way over their head that they don't know how to manage and all that stuff. If you and I sell somebody a whole life policy and whatever, and I get killed in a car accident tomorrow, it's pretty clean. It's pretty easy. It's pretty simple to manage. Not as many variables, right? And so, you know, this shouldn't inject more complication in life, and it shouldn't inject more risk in life. It should be like kindling on the fire. It should accelerate. It's like gasoline on the fire of what we're trying to do, right? Like it should accelerate the growth and accelerate the efficiency by creating more leverage, right? So anyway, we could go on and on and on. I'm tired. So.
This was great. This was better than a role play. We got a real life. More than we can imagine.
Yep. No, it's good. So, but you know, at the end of the day, like when I look at this, when I compare whole life, you know, I'm to IUL, and the reason I love whole life, just to kind of put a bow on this, it's the fact that I can look at this and I can say, all right, I know, I'm going to just erase this for a second, just to kind of recap. I'm going to say, I know that the non-guarantees I can explain to you, and it's very simple. With an IUL, it's going to take me 10 minutes, 20 minutes to explain to you how it works. With a whole life policy, I could say, all right, here's a non-guaranteed, 100% of current dividends assumption paid out, 5.2%. So the net cash value and the growth here and the increase in net cash value every year is based on the fact that they're going to pay a dividend every year, and the dividend they're going to pay is 5.2%. And so that 5.2% dividend is the lowest they've been, right? And so, and they've paid it for 120 years, every single year. So, okay, we look at that and we know, okay, they've paid it every year. It's 5.2, it's the lowest percent. So guess what? If the 5.2% goes down, this will perform worse. If it goes up, it will perform better. And if they don't pay, well, then this is the worst case scenario that we have over here is the dividend. Like, boom, that is explained in a nutshell, you know? And I can confidently say that I truly believe dividends are going to go back up. We're at the lowest rate we've ever had. And so I can confidently say that they're going to go up. And I can confidently say, you know, with history, 120 years, never missing it through the Depression, the Great Recession, the wars, and all that stuff, that they're going to pay a dividend, right? So I can right now comfortably say, hey, this is what it is. I feel comfortable looking at this being like, I think it's going to outperform this because I think rates are going to go up. Now, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when dividend rates were at 8% and they've been going down, if this was illustrated at 8%, well, yeah, it would have underperformed what was sold. But once again, this is just, if you understand how this is put together and how it actually performs, it's easy to make an educated decision as to what the best thing is for you. And once again, if we're comparing this to a savings alternative and not an investment alternative, now the value proposition of this account goes through the roof, right? Because we're not relying on this for an investment. This is an opportunity fund to take advantage of investments when the market is down. You know, that's what it is. So anyway, that's it. That's what I'll end with. If you have any questions, comment in the comment section below. I'm sure there are going to be some. And Brian, thanks for the fun. Thanks for the entertainment. Thanks for the comments and engaging. I know I give you a hard time and I sound frustrated, but I actually do genuinely appreciate, you know, people like you coming on here. I know you believe in what you do. I know we're on opposite sides of the coin as far as like what we believe and how we want to serve clients. But I will once again give you kudos. Like out of all the IUL agents, as much as I disagree with you, you and I are probably more aligned with it than any other IUL agent that I know, even though I won't go so far to say is that we're aligned on that. But on the scale of relativity, you know, I do appreciate you. And I love that you have at least the passion for what you're doing and believe in it. And, you know, that is what it is. I would, Brian, encourage you to think about, you know, the cash flow hacking concept and utilizing life insurance more as a stability account and a savings alternative, not an investment alternative like IULs, and injecting real estate into that and being more opportunistic and coming at it to Oregon cash flow is legit too. Nah, I disagree. Like I've seen too many of his illustrations from people that I've had problems with. So, I mean, if you think that guy's legit, I mean, I've literally looked at illustrations that have been sent to me by people, too many problems. too many problems of those things just blowing up. So anyway, that is what it is. So, all right, guys, have a blessed, inspirational day. I'm tired. I'm going to go take a nap. See ya.